Hello, everyone. My name is Stanley St. Rose, and today we're going to be talking about the short story End of Clay Are Recreated, written by Isabel Allende. Now, before I go into summary analysis of this work, please remember to leave a like, subscribe, and or comment so that the channel can continue to grow. Now, this work by Isabel Allende is very interesting. Basically, what happens within this work is that in Colombia, there's this volcano. And this volcano, it has sheets of ice that's in its slopes. And the volcano erupts, and the sheets of ice, they melt, and they mix with rocks, mud. It's pretty much an avalanche. And the avalanche, goes down and pretty much buries a bunch of people, thousands of people, approximately 23,000 and plus people in Colombia. Now, the townspeople were warned before the volcano erupted. The scientists believe that the volcano was going to erupt, that the people were in danger, but nobody listened, nobody cared, nobody paid attention to them. And so this horrific tragedy happened. This is a true tragedy that happened. The short story is written based upon a true tragedy. So basically, here's the short story part of what basically happens. So, the volcano erupts, the ice sheets that were on top, that were in the slopes of the volcano, they melt, and basically, the mud, the water, the rocks, all the dirt, all that gets mixed into a huge slushy avalanche, and it goes down, and thousands of people get buried alive. And, the Colombian officials, military, all types of personnel, whoever can, they just, descend upon this tragedy of nature, and they try to help rescue as many people as they can. And basically, what happens here is that it's everybody is quite sad, and we come to the point where we focus on this girl by the name of Azucena. Azucena is this young 13-year-old girl that they find. Her body was buried under the mud, all the way up to her neck, and this reporter, he's the one that finds her. His name is Ralph Carley, and he finds her. He's a broadcaster. He's a news personnel. Ralph Carley finds her, and basically, she's still alive. He tries to rescue her, but he can't get close, because if he gets too close, what happens is that he's going to lose her, because it's kind of like quicksand. As soon as you step into the mud, you sink down. And so Ralph Carley here, he really wants to help this little girl. His camera, his crew team, they're filming her face. They were in a helicopter, so they were able to see what was going on in this valley better than most people. And so when Ralph Carley gets there, he's talking to the little girl. He's trying to rescue her. He throws a rope out to her, screams at her to grab it. She wasn't even aware of the rope when it was first sent out. And so Ralph, he's trying to help her out, trying to rescue her. But they're starting to realize that really they can't get her up. They try to pull her out. Her body starts to come up a little bit, but her legs get stuck. And she even says that her brothers are clinging onto her legs, but we're pretty sure that they're dead, because they have no oxygen. They're under the mud, and she's the only one. Her head is the only thing that they can see, and she tries to get out, but she really can't. So this 13-year-old girl is stuck underneath this mud. Ralph is really trying to help her. She says to him, I don't want to be alone. And Ralph, he doesn't want to leave her alone. And so throughout the next 3 days, they really build this close relationship between the two of them, where they reveal to each other their fears, their dreams, their hopes, their aspirations. It's this moment of truth between two individuals, an adult male and this 13-year-old girl that's never been out of her village. She's never been out of her village. It's this first time that she's 13, and she's trying to grow up, but she's never going to get a chance to grow up, because she dies in the end of the short story, and it's quite chilling. So Ralph, before she dies, before the hope is gone, they really get close. He tells her stories. He tries to give her food. She can't eat that much. The doctors check on her. Her face is displayed every single place, all over the world, that people who are watching this on TV. She became the symbol of this tragedy, the symbol of man versus nature. And in terms of like deeper meaning, like right now, this part of the story, in terms of deeper meaning and analysis here, one thing that we can take is that basically this little girl is a casualty of nature. Sometimes tragedies happen in nature's earthquakes, volcanoes, tsunamis, explosions, gun violence. I mean, all things that are man-made, or are all things within life that happen without your control. I'm throwing like man-made events, and also natural events. Now, yes, this short story is mainly focusing on natural events, but what I want to bring in, also man-made, like gun violence, explosion, things like that, because sometimes things happen in life that you cannot control. Things happen in life that just happen. You have no control over them, and sometimes it can come out of nowhere and take your life. And this 13-year-old girl, who's 13, starting to grow up, starting to think about what she's gonna do with her life, starting to think about love, and falling in love one day, and having a life of somewhat. But all of that gets taken away from her. And actually, throughout the short story, one of the things that happened before she dies, she kind of regrets that, she'll never get to fall in love and be in love with someone. Ralph kind of says to her, like, I love you, it's not the same thing, but there's this type of tenderness, this tender-heartedness between them, where they kind of recognize that she's gonna die. At first, it wasn't clear that she was gonna die, but as the short story moves along, we get to the point where we believe that this little girl really doesn't have a chance of surviving, that this little girl doesn't have a chance of making it out alive. And she reveals her fear, and she recognizes it and acknowledges that she is not going to make it. And this also makes Ralph, break out and understand the things in his life that he's been running away from. At first, the little girl was running away from the idea of dying, from the idea of not having, not falling in love and not having a life. And she just faces the truth. She acknowledges the truth that there's a good chance that she might die right there, and so that also makes Ralph here face the truth of his life when he thinks back of the war in Europe, when he thinks back about the abuse that he faced from the hand of his father. He had a very tough, very rough, very abusive father that beat him, that terrorized him and his sister. His sister died when he was young. His mom was pushed into doing some weird things, some sexual things, because he talks about how he saw his mom naked, and had to do certain things in time of war, and how she was ashamed at some point, when he had discovered her naked, and and during this war in his childhood. So Ralph Carley here, he goes in, and he faces the fears, the traumas, the abuses, the things that he's been running away from all of his life. And one of the most interesting things that he says within this work is that when he was a child, he was buried just like Azucena is buried within the short story underneath the mud. He says that he was buried in life. Now that is powerful, because sometimes life can bury you. That is a major deep analysis right there. How life can bury you while you're still alive. Like, there's some problems, some stressors, some anxiety, some things, some situations that you face in life that even though that you're alive, you feel that you are buried alive, right? And Ralph, he's been running away from some truth, some abuses, some things that he experienced as a kid when he was 13. And by watching Azucena struggle for life to live within this mud avalanche, he faces his own fears and recognizes the pains and things that he's been running away from all of his life. So even though during different situations, Azucena and Ralph here, they're actually facing the same situation. He has been buried in life. She is buried in the mud. She'll never get to live, have a family, fall in love, meet a nice guy, and all that kind of stuff. And he himself, he's been running away. He's been buried alive from the abuses of his father, from losing his sister dying, from his mother, and how he loved his mother and sister. But the past took them away from him. The situations in the past took them away from him. And here, him and Azucena and Ralph here, they make this connection of being buried and understand each other's pain, because they both have understood the reality of being buried alive. And so, as everybody else starts to die and other people start to die in this mud avalanche, Ralph and Azucena, they get closer, and at the end, she he's kind of like, I'm gonna remember you. I'm gonna make sure that other people don't forget about you. He's gonna keep her in her heart, in his heart, and he kisses her forehead and says, I love you. And she dies. She can't go on anymore. She ultimately she dies, and she's the symbol of this tragedy, this mud avalanche that just took out everybody that was living, in the valley of this volcano. And really, this changes Ralph. It changes him a lot. Ralph Carley here, he does go back home, and there's some pain, some wounds, some things that he's been facing all his life. And in one way we can say here, if we go towards the analysis and deeper meaning here, we can say that Azucena is the one that rescued Ralph Carley instead of the other way around, because Ralph Carley could not rescue Azucena, but Azucena rescued Ralph Carley. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is the fears, the things that were burying Ralph Carley all his life, his meeting, his connection, his meeting with Azucena allowed him to explore and finally face the abuses, the war that happened in Europe, losing his sister, losing his mother, losing the people that were close to him. He was able to confront and face those things that were keeping him buried alive. And we can say maybe he found a little bit of closure from his past, and maybe he can move on and not be buried from life anymore, and actually have a life where he's not running away from things, because he pretty much tells us within the short story that he's been running away all his life. And we can say that this is the truth, because throughout the short story he tells us that he's loved a lot of women, that he's been with a lot of women, and that tells us, he's never been committed to one woman, because he's experienced the loss of his mother, he's experienced the loss of his sister. So in his life there is this perpetual pattern of losing women, both mom, sister, and also lovers. So he's experienced loss and just keep running away from things like love, and because he knows that this can come with loss. And also the narrator that narrates is a woman that he's actually with. We're not really we don't know a lot about this woman, but this woman is deeply in love with Ralph Carley, and she even says, she's the narrator. She narrates the whole thing to us, and she even tells us that if she could, to get a moment of tenderness, a moment of love and kindness from Ralph Carley, because that's her lover, she wishes that she could trade places with Azucena, so that he can, be in that tender kiss on the forehead moment and really experience love from Ralph Carley, because it seems to me, in terms of deeper meaning and analysis here, that there's a type of love and tenderness that she was not getting from Ralph Carley. Wow. Yeah. So again, there's many layers of this short story. The humans versus the natural world, the life burying past that Ralph Carley is running away from. He's buried alive, but he's above ground. Azucena recognizing that she'll never get to marry, never get to love, never get to experience, never get to go out of her village, because she lived her entire 13 years of life in her village, and she died in her village. And she's never going to experience the things that make life life. So that's quite sad. And also the narrator, who's desperately in love with Ralph Carley. Maybe Ralph Carley will move on and actually fall in love with her. But we can see that there's a lot of people that are buried here, and maybe the narrator and Ralph Carley, maybe they'll get free from what they're buried from, and there's ample evidence to prove that within this work. but Azucena will not get free. She dies. In terms of the title, End of Clay Are Recreated, this is something that brings us back to the earth. This is something that brings us back to Genesis. I mean, in the Bible, God creates man out of clay, right? Out of the dust of the earth, God creates man. And so this brings us back to the very beginning of the universe in terms of Christianity, where God creates man, right? God creates man out of clay. And this is something that's like sometimes you have to go low to really figure out the roots of your problem, to really figure out the things that are keeping you buried. And so Ralph Carter had to go all the way back to the beginning of his life to unbury himself. Yeah, he had to go all the way back there when he was 13 to unbury himself from the traumas of his childhood. So we you had to really get deep down in the dirt to kind of like look at human plight, because human plight, the human condition, it comes with horrors, it comes with tragedies, it comes with little girls dying at 13, it comes with people that are desperately in love with you, but they can't find that tenderness from you. It's something that's deep and rooted down all the way from Genesis, and we can even say maybe the events that happened in the garden with Adam and Eve, because trauma, betrayal, mistrust, the fall of man. It all goes back to the clay. It all goes back to creation. So there's several deep meanings and analysis that we can find here about emotions, about backgrounds, about being buried in life, and actual landslides, and being buried in emotions that are not expressed in terms of a narrator, because she's also buried with emotions for Ralph Carlo that she can't truly feel. And at the end, there's some hope. Maybe Ralph Carlo will, because of his meeting with Azucena, will finally get some, heal from the his past, and actually fall in love with the narrator if it's possible. Because the short story really starts with the narrator and Ralph Carlo in bed, and they're together, and then he goes off to be a news reporter. So yeah, that's the short story. That's all I have to say about it. Please remember to leave a like, subscribe, and or comment, and I'll see you guys in the next video. End of Clay Are We Created?